afternoon. How's everyone doing out there? All right. We have a fabulous general session planned. And what we were doing is we're going to have our three speakers each come up and speak. And then we will be using the app again to ask questions. So find the session, and as you're listening, make sure you're putting questions in there and hitting that up arrow to raise it in priority, and we'll be doing Q&A at the end. So to start, Julie Lanford is going to be our first speaker. Julie is the Wellness Director for Cancer Services, a nonprofit in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. She's a registered dietitian, a licensed nutritionist, and a board-certified specialist in oncology. Awesome. Her passion is wellness for cancer prevention and survivorship, and she specializes in making healthy living fun. Julie, come on up.
Well, thanks for having me. Can you all hear me okay? Yep. Great. Woo, I hear you. So my portion of this talk is all about cancer, nutrition, myths, and truths. So hopefully we will, cover some of those that you've heard before. You'll probably read it and groan a little bit, in your head. Maybe it's something you've heard and you're thinking, oh, how many times has someone told me this? But I'm hoping that there's a lot of things that you'll take from this that will help you feel good about the way that you're nourishing yourself, and also help you respond to others who maybe have some well-intentioned but misguided advice. So here is what I call the perils of nutrition advice. It seems that everybody has an opinion on food, right? And just because someone knows how to eat does not make them an expert in nutrition, okay? And so the reason that I say that is because I get questions all the time. Emails, clients coming into my office, on social media of the latest crazy thing. And my first question is, okay, someone says, well, they told me I should never eat sugar. And who is they? You want to find out, where is this information coming from? Because a lot of times people are reading it online, and it turns out anyone can write whatever they want online. So we need to dig down and figure out, what is it that the person is trained to do? And there are a lot of people who, they like to give advice, but they maybe don't have the training. And so always ask, is this somebody who has been trained in nutrition? Do they have a degree? Have they taken classes? And so myself, Kim is also a registered dietitian. We have gone through that training, and hopefully you'll feel better about some of the information that we're sharing today. So first off, we'll do our myth busting. We're going to debunk 5 common cancer nutrition myths, and I will offer you the corresponding truth that we know around that myth. So we'll do that truth telling and understand the key cancer nutrition truths. And then what I think is the most important when I am working with my survivor clients is that I want you to feel good about the way you're nourishing your body. I want you to find balance in being able to treat yourself, what I call feed your soul, as well as feeding your body, and to reduce any anxiety you have around food. I know that there are a lot of people who are worried that the foods that they're eating can contribute to either risk of recurrence or maybe counteracting their treatments. And so I want you to feel good after I've finished, knowing that you don't have to be anxious around what you're choosing to eat. All right, so you ready? Myth number 1. I bet you could all guess it, right? The myth is sugar feeds cancer. And what I hear people asking me this all the time, and sometimes they're reading ingredient lists, or sometimes they're just avoiding all sources of carbohydrate completely. But what we know is that all of our cells, whether they're cancerous or not, are using glucose for energy. And glucose is the basic building block of carbohydrates. And our body doesn't get to pick and choose which cells get what fuel. And so when we eat carbohydrate foods, our bodies break it down into glucose, it's absorbed into our blood, and then it goes around our body fueling our cells. The truth is, yes, cancer cells do use glucose for energy, but so does every other cell of our body. And so what we need is that glucose. We need the glucose for our brains, we need the glucose especially for energy for our muscle cells, but we want to choose healthy sources, right? So the recommendation around evidence-based nutrition guidelines for cancer survivors, yes, there are evidence-based nutrition guidelines for cancer survivors. Many people, I think, don't realize this. And I get these mainly from groups of scientists. I call them just smart people. But the American Institute for Cancer Research is one of my favorites. The American Cancer Society has guidelines as well. What they do is they review every study that's ever been done on nutrition and cancer, and then they rank the evidence as to how do they say the same things across the line. And so a lot of times if you've heard someone say, well, I read a study, right? One study can't give us the definitive answer. It's a combination of studies where we see the same results over and over again that help us know, oh yeah, this is something we want to pay attention to. So the evidence-based guideline around, I would say, sugar is this: to avoid sugary drinks and limit consumption of energy-dense foods. Energy-dense foods is just our fancy way of saying junk food, right? Or desserts. So it's not that you have to completely avoid them. It does say avoid sugary drinks, and I have a hard time giving people such a hard line. So when we say avoid, that means we do not make a habit out of it. We're not drinking sodas or sweet tea. I live in North Carolina, so there's a lot of sweet tea, but we're not having them on a regular basis. Why? I said that sugar feeds cancer is a myth, of course. However, consuming sugary drinks we know contributes to weight gain, and water is our best alternative. So what I would tell you is if you're drinking mostly water, unsweet tea, coffee, not the kind of coffee where there's 4 pumps of syrup and whole milk and whipped cream on top, that's dessert in a cup, okay? But good stuff. It's true, but you want to find that balance of you're not having dessert every morning. But if you just brew coffee and you put a little bit of sugar in it, that's perfectly fine. All right, myth number 2. Breast cancer survivors should avoid soy completely. The fact is that eating soy in moderate amounts, of course we have to define moderation, right? It doesn't help you at all if you don't know what that is. That's 1 to 2 standard servings a day. Does not increase a woman's risk for recurrence or death. And the human evidence, clinical and epidemiological, overwhelmingly shows that isoflavones, which are these plant components of soy foods, are not harmful and may benefit you. So I get this question all the time, and the way I explain it is that isoflavones, yes, are phytoestrogens. Phyto means plant. So these are plant estrogens. Remember, plants do not grow human estrogen. Okay? So these are plant estrogens, and the concern originally was that these plant estrogens would bind into those estrogen receptors and cause cancer to grow. But what we know is that the studies were originally done in rats or rodent models, and in case you don't know, you're not a rat. Rats do not metabolize soy the same way humans do. And so the results really aren't applicable. We also see current studies with actual breast cancer survivors showing that it's been not causing harm. Now, I give you a caveat, okay? If your oncologist, because I know some oncologists are still concerned about the soy, if your oncologist who saved your life told you to avoid soy foods, and this crazy dietitian is like, oh, it's fine, I can understand that you're kind of sitting there like, well, I don't know, who do I trust more? So I will tell you, you do not have to eat soy to have a healthy diet, okay? So what is the truth? Whole versions of soy, we know, are good for us, but we do not want you to consume highly processed, concentrated forms of isoflavones. Okay, so if it's a soy powder, a soy bar, I wouldn't want you to consume that, but eating soy foods like tofu, soybeans, soy milk, soy nuts are perfectly healthy. We know they're a great source of protein, also a great source of fiber, of course, potassium, magnesium, all kinds of different nutrients, and those phytochemicals are really good for you. All right, myth number 3. Maybe you've heard this one. Meat and dairy cause cancer, so you should never have it. Okay? Now, this is what I say. The evidence, when we look at studies of people who consume vegan and vegetarian diets and compare that to people who consume plant-based diets that have moderate amounts of meat in it, we do not find them any more protective. However, we do know a plant-based diet is really important. And I will also say, if you want to be a vegan or you want to be a vegetarian, I think that is a perfectly good choice, and I'm happy for you to do that. If you want to eat plant-based and include some meat and dairy products, I think that's a perfectly good choice. So I call it choose your own adventure. It's perfectly fine. Now, what's not okay is to get your nutrition advice from Netflix documentaries or celebrities, okay? All right, so what is the truth around meat and dairy? What we know from evidence-based recommendations is that we want you to limit your consumption of red meats. If you don't know, yes, pork is a red meat. So red meat counts as beef, pork, and lamb. Now, limit means 18 ounces a week or less. I actually don't find a lot of people who consume more than that. So that's how we consider moderation for red meats. And there is a recommendation to avoid processed meats. Those are the meats with the nitrates in it, things that are hanging on a shelf. So I tell my clients, if you go to the grocery store and you pick up a package of meat, it's hanging on the hanger, this is February and it says it's good until July, probably not good for you, right? Meat should go bad. So, but you can find perfectly healthy deli meats if you want to at the deli counter, fresh meats. Why is this our recommendation? Because experts found convincing evidence that red meat is a cause of colorectal cancer, and choosing processed meats also increases risk of colorectal cancer. All right, myth number 4. Here's another favorite. Acidic diets cause cancer, so you should eat an alkaline diet, okay? Or some people will try to sell you alkaline water. The truth around this is that there's no good evidence to prove that what you eat can change your whole body pH. And I point this out because our body's pH, especially in our blood, is very tightly regulated. You don't want it to change, okay? If it were to change significantly, it would cause you harm. So what we do know, though, if you look at this picture, there's a lot of debate when I've read up on, well, what is an alkaline diet? What do they actually tell you to eat? So this is just some, visual. But what I'll tell you is what they recommend you eat on an alkaline diet is pretty healthy, right? They're telling you to eat fruits and vegetables and, to stay away from too many processed foods and lots of sugar. So I don't argue with that. I argue with the premise of the diet. But what I would say is the evidence-based recommendation is eat more of a variety of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes like beans. Okay, those are those plant foods. We want you to get more of those because they have important nutrients called phytochemicals. If you don't like the word chemical, we'll call them phytonutrients. And it's the basis of a cancer-fighting diet. Antioxidants are one type of phytochemical that most people have heard of. They're really great for you. The more plants you eat, the more you get. That's the bottom line. All right, myth number 5. So this is our last myth, right? Superfoods prevent cancer. So you've all seen those products. You look at the package and that's says it's made out of superfoods. Like, what even is that? There is no definition for what a superfood is, okay? There's no such thing as a superfood. I will say you can have a super diet. You can have a super diet if you eat lots of healthy foods, right? But there's no one food or nutrient that you absolutely have to eat to optimize your survivorship. Usually, they're using this term to sell you a product, or they are using this term to sell you their book, or whatever it is, their services. So it's a gross oversimplification to even think that one food on its own could have a major influence over your chance of developing cancer or cancer coming back. Okay, so superfoods, when you see that term, roll your eyes and then figure out if it's actually something you want to eat. The truth is, do not use supplements to protect against cancer. So we have reviewed all kinds of data. We've studied people who take supplemental versions of nutrition, and it turns out they're not really that healthy, okay? So there's not a huge advantage over taking supplements versus not taking supplements. There is a huge advantage for people who eat more fruits and vegetables. There's a huge advantage for people who consume more beans, who have more, plant products in their day. So when it comes to juices, powders, pills, whatever this person is selling or trying to get you to get, there's no proof that it's beneficial. So this is what I say. Your body prefers nutrients and food, not pills. If you want to take a multivitamin or something like that, or, of course, if your doctor's recommended calcium or your vitamin D is low or your iron is low, definitely you need to take it. But just because there's not always a great reason, if you want to take a multivitamin, it should not be in replacing a junky diet, right? So if you eat a junky diet and you take a multivitamin, it's not really going to help you. If you want to take a multivitamin, it should be built on top of an already pretty healthy diet. So my hopes for you on this is, first off, that you have better knowledge about the evidence regarding nutrition and cancer. Okay, so that you can go when somebody tries to tell you something, you have a place to go where you can find that information. What are the evidence-based guidelines? If someone tells you research said, or I read on the internet, you know, if they said I read on the internet, you know what to do, right? Close your ears. Research, if research said something, you gotta figure out what that research was and was it done in humans, okay? Drop the guilt, lower the anxiety, and enjoy your food. You do not need to feel like every time you sit down to eat is some kind of anxious event. I had a client come in who said that everything in the grocery store she was afraid of. That is not a healthy relationship. I want you to have a healthy relationship with food because you have to eat multiple times a day. And the reason for living is not to sit around worrying about your food. You need to have a good day. So as we find this information, try to get out there and figure out how you can make eating fun and delicious. Don't worry, be happy, right? So here is my bottom line. Keep calm, eat your vegetables, and don't worry. So this last slide is just ways you can connect with me. I think that for our next speaker, we're gonna have someone come up and introduce them, but I'm honored to be on a panel with such great experts.
That was awesome. Thank you. Let's give another round of applause to Julie. And keep in mind, keep calm and eat your vegetables. I see that on some sort of shirt. I mean, that was great. I love it. Thank you. Our next speaker is Emilie Robinson. Emilie is a physical therapist and certified lymphedema therapist at Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa, Florida. She's a vocal advocate of exercise before, during, and after oncology treatment and loves to help others set functional fitness goals and see them achieved. Awesome. Welcome, Emilie.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I just want to thank everyone for coming, and I'm so blessed to have a chance to be here to speak to you all today. When my boss came and presented me with this awesome opportunity, I thought, wow, I mean, here I am speaking to other young women, maybe my age, and so I thought to myself, I have a huge responsibility to really share with everybody the importance of exercise and what I see every day. So the talk is going to be focused on the essentials of exercise for breast cancer. I have some really cute other animal pics in here for you guys. Developing a specialized program to meet your health needs, because no two cancer survivors are the same. So this quote here, if we could give every individual the right amount of nourishment and exercise, not too little and not too much, we would have found the safest way to health. I love this quote because I really don't advocate for one end of the spectrum of exercise or the other, okay? You're not gonna see me say, you know, go join a CrossFit gym today, or don't do anything and just relax on the couch. You have to find your happy medium. And, you know, think about, while I'm talking to you guys, what your motivation is for exercising. I know it's really hard for us sometimes to find that motivation to just get up every day and exercise. And I had a young patient come in, and I was working with her, and she looked at me and she said, we're the same age, Emilie. And she was like, what do you do for exercise? You're in such great shape. Who motivates you? Do you motivate yourself? And I said, it can be really difficult, but there are certain things I do, and I don't always practice what I preach, but I've learned a few things that can help me. So I am about 14 weeks pregnant today, so I exercise for my unborn child. I know that my doctors say, Emilie, it's really important that you exercise so that your child is healthy. So that's who I exercise for right now. But think about to yourself, do you do it for your family? Do you do it for yourself? Maybe there's a little bit of both going on. So we know that there are benefits to exercise in relation to breast cancer. So some of those things include improved perceived quality of life. So when you exercise, I like to use this little Elle Woods term. Exercise creates endorphins. Endorphins make people happy. Happy people don't kill their husbands. So that's a really good way to put it. Things are gonna get better for you. Your self-esteem, your confidence level, your sex drive, your ability to sleep through the night, your focus at work. These are some things that are hugely important, especially after treatment. We wanna improve your quality of life. Weight reduction. So there's a lot of medications that you're taking. Chemo, radiation, different treatments that can make you gain weight. So being active is gonna help you lose that weight. And also, like the ladies up here, having a great diet is going to help you as well. There are so many studies that are gonna give you the evidence to say that if you exercise, that will help you lose the weight. And then positive outcomes for recurrence, progression, and survival. So a bunch of studies have been done to show that even just walking 3 to 5 times a week can lower your risk of recurrence about 50%. So, I mean, that's half. So if you're just engaging in even just walking, get out of your house and walk around the mall or the block. That's still doing something. No one's saying that you have to be very regimented with something. So I want to talk to you guys about some common misconceptions of exercise, because you're going to go see your oncologist, and like the ladies up here said, somebody's going to have something to say to you all the time. Maybe your girlfriends or your family members want to tell you, hey, this is what you should do. This is the new exercise trend that you should try. The first one, I have a little elephant here because it is the big elephant in the room. After you've had an axillary lymph node dissection, you will develop lymphedema if you exercise, which couldn't be further from the truth. It's actually very important to exercise, because we know that if you don't use that arm, it's going to atrophy the muscles. And if you get an injury in that arm, it's going to get inflamed. What does inflammation do? It can cause lymphedema. So you have to find a happy medium, and later on I'll talk to you guys about how to go about doing that. The second myth, the best form of activity in recovery is to elevate arms and not lift anything heavier than 5 pounds. So how many people in this room go to the grocery store and get a gallon of milk? Raise of hands. Everybody. That's about 8 pounds. So if you're lifting that and putting that in your fridge, you're lifting over those 5 pounds. So obviously, post-surgery, you're gonna have some restrictions, but that doesn't mean that they're lifelong. The next thing is finding the motivation, like we talked about, to exercise. So I like to use, it's kind of small, but the self-determination theory when it comes to exercising. So the first thing is you have to have autonomy. You have to figure out what drives you to exercise. Some intrinsic factors, inner things, I exercise for myself, and some extrinsic factors. I'm exercising for my family. I want to live a longer, healthier life so that I can see my kids grow up. Something is relatedness. You have to be able to feel like you fit into something. I know sometimes I have a lot of patients come to me and they say, I can't go to these exercise classes because I'm with all these crazy fit people and I just don't feel like I can do it. And I say, let's find you a group of women, men you can relate to, cancer survivors also, that are going through the same thing. And then competence. You have to feel like you can exercise, you can do it. So you have to go seek that out. If you don't feel comfortable, we've all seen those crazy YouTube videos where someone's at the gym misusing a piece of equipment. So you don't want to be that person. So it's better to seek out help in order to figure out how to safely exercise. I love these pictures. I feel like the dog with the rings is me a lot of times. But don't find time to exercise, make the time. So how do you go about it? You have the motivation now, you want to exercise. You should have a specialized exercise program for you, tailored individually. Things you can do to do this: going to see a physical therapist. A lot of times, all of our insurance covers PT for the most part. I work in an outpatient setting at Moffitt Cancer Center. I have patients come to me all the time, and we put together a good exercise routine for them that's safe and that I can monitor them through. You can also find certified oncology personal trainers that will help you as well. They'll perform a thorough assessment, create goals for you, and then you can get a plan in place. So who to reach out to for support? You guys have this amazing coalition of other people you can reach out to for support. Your family, your friends, your care team. Care team are physicians, rehab, nutrition, anybody else. Personal trainers, your local gyms, and local support groups. So some helpful resources, obviously, what you're a part of today. The Live Strong program at the YMCA. So that's a relatively new program they've rolled out. I have a handout for you guys, and I've added some things on it for you to check out. Because you can actually be part of a group where they set it up at your local Y, and it's all people who are survivors of cancer going through an individualized program. The National Institute of Cancer Physical Activity Center, and then the Lymphedema Guru. For those of you concerned about lymphedema, Joe Zuther is actually a really amazing person to go to with any questions that you might have about lymphedema. And then breastcancer.org is another great site. And then the American Cancer Society, just so that you guys can further find more evidence to support your need to exercise. So I want you guys to remember that you're an unstoppable force and you have the power to be the greatest you possible. All of these are little pictures of motivational songs. Get your iPhone out before you exercise, download some of those songs. A personal favorite of mine is Moana, How Far I'll Go. So I like to listen to that before I exercise and just get motivated because you guys, have the power to be amazing because you already are. Thank you.
All right, our final speaker, and then we'll move into Q&A, so a reminder to be working on your questions, is Kimberly Rose Francis. Kim is a hands-on clinical dietitian at an acute care hospital in South Central Florida. She has over 6 years of experience as a general practice dietitian. In her free time, Kim has an active YouTube channel where she teaches about life as a dietitian, healthy plant-based recipes, and how to live a healthy lifestyle. Kimberly.
Thank you for that introduction, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Something that I did want to mention is that I am a big foodie and also a total vegetarian. And today I wanted to talk to you about the importance of adhering to a predominantly plant-based diet. Whether you have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or whatever social media platforms you have, you'll see on your social media feed, individuals are talking about their avocado toast, or they're giving you the recipe to their latest smoothie bowls, or simply everyone is going green to help to sustain the planet. Now, I'll be honest with you. I'm not one that is into nutrition fads and nutrition trends because they seem to come and go. But a plant-based diet is one trend that I hope continues because it is credible as well as evidence-based. Now, before I get into the science of the importance of adhering to a plant-based diet, I wanted to tell you all a little bit about my story. The reason why I decided to adhere to a plant-based diet. More than 3 decades ago, I was born on the beautiful island of Jamaica. And when I was about 4 years old, my parents decided to migrate to the United States. It was not that long after, at the age of 5, that I started elementary school. And as it is with any 5-year-old child, my 2 favorite times of the day were recess as well as lunch, especially lunch. Maybe that's why I'm a dietitian today. During lunch, I was exposed to foods I had never tasted before. There were chicken nuggets and cupcakes and fish sticks and the famous peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I still remember the first time I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I was at a school trip, and if you have kids, the school tells the parents, go ahead and pack a lunch for your child to take. My parents packed a traditional Jamaican entree, which consisted of rice and some form of curry, jerk, or brown stew chicken. And I didn't want to eat that. I wanted to fit in. I wanted a sandwich. So I decided I'm going to pretend like I don't have anything to eat. My friend's mother, noticing that I wasn't eating, said, Kim, would you like a PB&J? And I'm like, what is that? Sure, it's a sandwich. And the first time I bit into that sandwich, it was heavenly. I went to my friend's mom and I said, you have to give me the recipe so that I can tell my mom. She looked at me in a little amazement and said, okay, you simply put peanut butter on one side of the bread and you put jelly on the other side and you put it together. And I went home and I told my mom. Fast forwarding exactly a year, at the age of 6 years old, I started to develop breast. My brother, who was 11 years old at the time, started to develop breast as well. My mother was uncertain what was going on with her 2 young children, so she brought us to the pediatrician. And at the pediatrician, we got a thorough head-to-toe physical assessment. She took some blood and did some blood work, and she looked at our growth charts from the previous years. She came to my mother and she told my mother that her children were consuming too much junk food. She encouraged my mother to dispense of the bacon that we love, to switch from whole milk to 2% milk or fat-free milk, to include more green leafy vegetables and produce into our diet, to encourage us to go outside and get some physical activity. In my mind, as a 6-year-old child, this was a war on tasty. I knew what foods I had liked, and I knew that my mother was not going to punish me by taking away these foods. But when we got home, and after a few weeks, I noticed that the items in the cupboard, as well as the refrigerator, started changing. My brother and I became upset. You see, we were very tenacious children. We would have secret meetings at 6 and 11 to try to figure out tactics and ways to convince my mother. We found one fireproof tactic, and that was my father. We went to my father and we had false tears in our eyes, and we convinced him that we were not happy. At last, my mother listened to reason, and we got back the junk foods which we so loved. Fast forwarding a few years, at 20 years old, I was a junior at the Florida State University, and the local church I was attending at the time had a breast cancer awareness workshop. During this workshop, I took copious notes because I was learning how to physically look in the mirror for any abnormalities, to see if there was any indentations, any pittings, any oozings, to lift up my arm and check the tissue underneath my arm to see if there's any lumps there. After I went home and I reviewed my copious notes, I went into the mirror and I applied everything that I learned. When I started palpating the tissue, I found a lump on the right side of my breast. At this time, I thought I was making up things in my head because I do have a very active imagination, and I still do to this day. So I said, okay, Kim, call it a quits, go to bed. When you wake up the next morning, give yourself another examination before class. And I did exactly that, and I found that the lump was still there. After divulging this information to my roommates, who are still my BFFs to this day, they encouraged me to go and get an opinion from an expert. So I went to a practitioner, and when he gave me a breast examination, he actually said, Kim, I find that you have several lumps in both of your breasts, but the lump that is the firmest, the lump that is not moving, is actually the lump that you had found on the right side of your breast. He had told me his care plan. He wanted me to get a biopsy. And to be honest with you, I didn't know what this B word meant. I just said, yeah, sure, because I didn't want to seem silly and ignorant. So after I went home, I opened my computer and I looked on Google, and there are 2 words that popped up with biopsy. Those words were benign as well as malignant. And at this point, I realized what his care plan entailed. To be honest with you, I decided at that point in my life, at 20 years old, that this was not happening to me. I would rather live in ignorance. So for about the next year, I decided to ignore all the phone calls from my physician, reminding me to get a biopsy and to come back to visit him. As a matter of fact, I didn't even remember that I had a lump in my breast until he called or until it started hurting. After unsuccessfully trying to reach me, he then contacted my emergency contact person, who was my mother. And my mother gave me a call and she said, Kim, when you come home from school for spring or summer break, I don't remember which one exactly, you will be getting a biopsy. I'm not going to share with you the fear and trepidation that I felt the morning of the biopsy when I saw the needle, but the results of the biopsy showed that that lump was benign, but they still want me to follow up, which is something that I still do to this day. It is for this reason, as well as other correlating minor health issues, why I do adhere to a total vegetarian diet. According to the American Cancer Society, risk factors for developing cancer, it says for most Americans who do not use tobacco, the most important risk factor that can be changed are body weight, diet, as well as physical activity. Focusing on my area of expertise, diet, nutrition, there was a study that came out on Valentine's Day of this year from the British Medical Journal. And it actually said that there is an association between ultra-processed foods as well as cancer. Now, before I get into the study and its details, I want to tell you what an ultra-processed food is. NOVA, which is an organization that classifies foods, says that an ultra-processed food has 4 categories. The first category is that it can be eaten anytime, anywhere. The second category is that it has been enhanced so that it is shelf stable as well as it has an increased flavor. The third category is besides using salts, sugars, and oils to preserve it, it typically has additives. And then finally, the fourth category is that it can be eaten at a variety of places. So if you have in your mind pictures of Twinkie bars and cola and beef jerky, you have the correct conception of what an ultra-processed food is. So going back to the study, the British Medical Journal, it looked at over 100,000 Parisian men and women, and they found that when they increased ultra-processed foods in the diet by 10%, cancer was increased by 10% as well, particularly breast cancer. Now I want to bring out the limitations of this study from the authors. They state that this is one of the first studies of its kind, so that there needs to be more research. Additionally, they did not control for factors such as tobacco use, genetics, obesity, as well as other modifiable factors. So these are things that I do want us to remember. Now I want to look at some of the American Cancer Society diet tips for the prevention of cancer, which we're not going to go into on this slide, but I do want to review them with you. It states here to choose foods, from all food groups, which Julie mentioned earlier. And it says to try to eat at least 2.5 cups of fruits and vegetables a day. The next thing that they admonish us to do is to eat plenty of high fiber foods, which are whole grains and legumes such as beans. It says to limit the intake of red meat, as well as avoiding salt-cured, smoked, and pickled foods, and to choose a low-fat dairy product. What does this sound like to you? A diet that is pushing plants while at the same time limiting the intake of red meats as well as from foods from the animal kingdom? This is a predominantly plant-based diet. Let's look at the guidelines from the same American Cancer Society for life after cancer. It says that cancer survivors in stable health should follow the same recommendations that we saw on the previous slide. Research has suggested that the risk of breast cancer reoccurrence might be higher for women who are obese, as well as who do not eat many fruits and vegetables, and I'm going to add whole grains and legumes to that as well. So science has shown that a plant-based diet helps to control weight, as well as you have an increased intake of fruits and vegetables. You see, the American diet is composed of over 60% of ultra-processed foods. And according to the dietary guidelines, the 2015 to 2020 dietary guidelines for Americans, it says that a healthy diet consists of foods that contain fish because of the omega-3 fatty acid benefit. It includes foods that have fruits and vegetables, as well as limits red meat. So the question now becomes, how can one adhere to a plant-based diet? I'm going to be honest with you, one size does not fit all. Because I'm total vegetarian does not mean that you have to be total vegetarian as well. Realize that there's different types of vegetarian diets. The first type of a vegetarian diet is a lacto-ovo vegetarian, which is a vegetarian that does choose to consume milk as well as eggs. The second type is a lacto-vegetarian, and if you think of that word lactose, that means dairy. It's a vegetarian that still eats plants as well as incorporates dairy products. The third type is an ovo-vegetarian, which includes eggs. There's a pescatarian, which eats fish, and the final vegetarian, which is the vegetarian that I categorize myself, is a total vegetarian or vegan. The next way one can adhere to a predominantly plant-based diet is to practice mindful eating, intentionally telling yourself that you're going to have a serving of fruit and or vegetables at each meal, and looking at that food, eating it, and enjoying it. And finally, the third way, which I think is one of the most easiest ways, is to experience Meatless Mondays. Meatless Mondays is a global initiative where for one day of the week, you choose to eat a plant-based diet. So again, in closing, realize that one size does not fit all. But something that we do need to do is to increase our intake of fruits and vegetables and not make sure that we do not include those ultra-processed foods in our diet. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. That was really great. Thank you. Okay, we are going to move into the Q&A. So if you haven't sent your questions in, make sure you please do. We have two great moderators that are coming up to join us on the stage. First, we have Dana Stewart. She's a YSC state leader and RISE advocate. And second, we have Stacy Lewis, which I hope everyone here has met. But if not afterwards, please introduce yourself. Stacy is the Chief Program Officer at YSC and also the Deputy Chief Executive. That very long title means that she works side by side me in running YSC. So with that, ladies, take it away.
Like it.
You want me to start?
Move over.
I'll move over.
Little reorganization. Forgive us.
Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dana.
Okay. The big question we're starting to see right away and what a lot of survivors always seem to ask is about weight gain, either during treatment or after. Any suggestions on how to either lose the weight and or keep it off?
All right, so I think we all three of us are going to have good suggestions. So I'll just tell you what I usually tell my clients. I actually host a mindful eating program at the nonprofit that I work for. And so I see a lot of breast cancer clients, and we don't completely understand why there is the weight gain. And we don't know if it's going, will you go back to a certain weight? What is your new ideal weight? And to be honest, I don't even keep a scale in my office because I find that people get so focused on a number on the scale that it kind of completely takes away from the purpose of eating, and it also takes away from your quality of life. So to me, the most important thing is finding a healthy relationship with food and addressing any of the emotional eating issues that are going on. And then really keying in on, are you consuming enough of the foods that we know to benefit your health? So like Kim was mentioning, well, how many fruits and vegetables are you eating? And what are your habits during the day? What are the things that you do most often? So I call it a habit if you do it 3 times a week or more. So start with those things. But of course, that has to be balanced with muscle building and maintaining muscle so that your body composition, regardless of the weight, I want somebody's body composition to be one that really promotes health. So that's just sort of my initial thoughts.
I have something to add as well. Also, intuitive eating. Basically what intuitive eating is listening to your hunger cues. I remember I had a hard time listening to my hunger cues. If I was thirsty, I would get something to eat. If I was tired, I would get something to eat. But realizing, are you really hungry, or is it something that you're masking as well? So intuitive eating, focusing on your hunger cues, realizing if you really are hungry or not, or if you're thirsty, or if you're tired, or if you're cranky. As Julie was saying, really focusing on trying to control your emotions instead of filling it with food instead.
So in relation to the weight gain question that came up, one of the questions is related to how do you start, Emilie, with an exercise program that's really starting to combat the weight gain, in particular post-treatment?
So definitely a super important thing, where do I start? I'm gaining this weight. I see patients all the time, they might be gaining weight from Arimidex, tamoxifen. If you had to have a hysterectomy, that's gonna throw you into menopause, things like that, that's gonna change some things for you. So what I best suggest is, reach out to your local cancer facility. And if your cancer facility has an outpatient rehab center, getting in to see a physical therapist. If you tell your doctor, I'm really concerned about this, and I know there's oncology physical therapists out there that can help me come up with a great program, they'll definitely recommend you to go see them. I've reached out to patients, especially with nutrition too. They'll come see me for a PT eval, and I'll say, they'll say, weight is a concern, Emilie. And I'll say, well, have you had an assessment with our nutritionists and outpatients and dietitians? And they'll say, no, I haven't. So I'll request it from their doctor. But really being an advocate to your doctor and telling them, hey, I'd like these. What the oncologists really consider us to be are supportive care services. So reaching out, because I know not everybody has access to a national cancer facility, but there are definitely other dietitians and physical therapists in your area who can help you get started on a safe plan.
Switching gears a little bit to talk about soy. Is there a certain format that's better than others? Does it matter? People are curious to know more specific.
Mostly if it's in real food form. And so we consider tofu, I know if you're somebody who reads a lot on the internet, I know there's a lot of debate about what counts as a processed soy food. Okay, well, soy sauce doesn't count as soy, okay? So at least I know that. There's debate about tofu. I am fine with people consuming tofu. Soybeans will have more fiber than tofu. But there's a time and place for consuming tofu too. So when I'm talking about soy foods, I'm mainly saying soybeans, soy nuts, soy milk, tofu, tempeh, all good choices. But you want to stay away from, soy that comes in a package. There can be ultra processed, soy foods. And those are the ones where we see higher concentrations of isoflavones in concentration that we don't want you to consume. So we want you to consume those isoflavones in the concentration as it's grown in the food and not, concentrated into some sort of product. But you might have thoughts on the processed
Something else
soy.
that I did want to say to give you guys a visual example, when Julie's talking about the concentrated soy products, those energy bars are known to have high, as she said in her presentation, high amounts of concentrated soy. I mean, it actually has more than the tofu. And I mean, I know when we're on the go, when we're not thinking, when we're not practicing mindful eating, we can just pick up one of those energy bars and go. But know that they are very high concentration of
So let's give you an alternative. Well, nuts.
nuts.
Nuts instead.
Nuts?
You need to grab something on the go, nuts, trail mix, we'll go with that.
Yeah.
So in relation to consumption, one of the questions is really around sugar, and it's a two-part question. One focused on the value or the lack thereof of a ketogenic diet, and then to tie into the sugar, is a certain amount of fruit too much in looking at the sugar consumption, although through fruit?
All right, so keto diet, not evidence-based. So we'll just kind of say that. I think that there are ways that you can utilize some of the information, some of the recipes in a way that's healthy, but the really, really restrictive ketogenic diets are not something I would recommend that you do as survivors. And if you do want to follow it, you need to really work with somebody who's making sure that you're getting all your nutrient needs met. That said, if you're kind of, I say, a more lenient kind of keto diet person, and you're just watching your carbs, which might be a good idea for a lot of people, the type of carbohydrate you're having matters. So simple sugars versus complex carbohydrates are obviously different. And then Kim is a certified diabetes educator, right? And so a lot of the diabetes information is what I will often direct my cancer survivor clients to, is because it helps to put carbohydrates in context as to how much is an appropriate amount. Did that kind of get at the question? Was there a more specific answer people were looking for?
I think if you could add the part about, really ensuring, so if you eat a lot of fruit, is that a concern about the sugar consumption?
Honestly, and I used to work in diabetes, never did I see someone, I mean, it was just me. I know probably there are some people out there that eat too much fruit, but I have yet to have somebody come in and I was concerned about them eating too much fruit. So what I always tell people is, those total amounts of fruits and vegetables we want you to have every day. If you like fruits more, eat more fruits. If you like vegetables more, eat more vegetables. Like, we really just need you to get those, like, in your mouth and swallowed. But I think that from the context of diabetes and understanding how carbohydrates work in our body is really, really important. So.
Something that I did want to bring out, Julie has an excellent handout sitting right in front of you. It has a plate, and there's a schematic on there. And half of your plate should be these phytochemicals. And so notice, half of the plate is either fruits or vegetables. I know a lot of people believe, fruits are not good, they can cause weight gain. And, Julie dispelled the myth about it promoting and feeding cancer. But notice that fruit does have benefits for the body as well. So really apply that to your life. I mean, you don't have to sit there and count out everything. So if you just draw an imaginary line on your plate, half of your plate's vegetables, 1/4 are these complex carbs, and the other 1/4 is your protein. That is really the premise of a healthy diet.
Sticking with diet questions that we haven't covered yet, how important is it to eat organic and pay attention to the dirty dozen?
Who wants to go first?
Shoot.
All right. So first off, it is far more important that you get fruits and vegetables, no matter what, however they're grown, okay, than not. So my bottom line, any vegetable, better than no vegetable. And then there's a lot of debate around, well, how much pesticide is actually on your food? How does the Dirty Dozen, the environmental work group, what is their science behind how they come up with that list of the Dirty Dozen? I don't like us terminology, giving clean and dirty to food, because I just think it gives us the wrong idea about food. So if you ask me, what matters most is that you eat fruits and vegetables. And I work with clients who have income levels across the board, and many low-income people are not going to have access or have the money to purchase organic versions of everything, and I don't think that they need to. And I personally don't buy all organic stuff. I don't necessarily shop off the Dirty Dozen list. If you want a practical list, I think it's fine. I have written on organic foods, but that really is my bottom line, that I want you to eat fruits and vegetables. If you are concerned about the amount of pesticides that are on your food, then you can choose organic as often, as is available. But I don't want you to feel bad about choosing conventionally grown foods. So I call that a choose your own adventure item. And we don't need to go about guilting other people for not choosing the same adventure.
I agree with that. Notice with the term organic, nothing can safely be ensured that it is organic. If a bird goes to a GMO crop and picks a seed and then flies over and drops it in the organic field and it starts growing, it's not really safe and sound that, okay, this is an organic food. Something else that Julie mentioned is budget. Everyone's on a budget. I'm on a budget. And I know sometimes organic produce is priced very high. So then I don't buy organic as well. Sometimes I have to buy frozen because I know I'm probably not going to get to that produce in time. I just stick it in the freezer. So that's what I tell to my patients and my clients as well. If you can't buy fresh, buy frozen. It doesn't necessarily have to be organic. As Julie said, just make sure you get it in your mouth, you swallow it, you digest it, it becomes a part of your being and a part of your cells.
Peace. Be with you.
So we're going to jump over to Emilie a little bit. A couple of questions around lymphedema. And regarding exercise as well as flying, should you wear compression sleeves to prevent or kind of manage lymphedema?
So depending on who your oncologist is, I've seen women get a script as early as when they still have their JP drains in from a mastectomy, or they never get one. Now, flying definitely increases your risk. The reason being is when you're changing altitude pressure levels, sometimes, like I know if I go on a plane and get off, regardless of being pregnant, my legs are gonna swell. It's the same concept for your arm. So yes, it is good when you're flying to have a lymphedema, to have a compression garment. Now, I would recommend you see a licensed physical therapist and certified lymphedema therapist before you actually get the garment, because there are different levels of compression that might be more appropriate for you than just the standard, okay, give her a 20 to 30 garment, that's what she needs. Because not everybody needs that much compression, we know that. And as far as exercising, I tell people, okay, for preventative, if you're wearing the sleeve, all a sleeve is going to do is contain your arm. It's not going to reduce your arm, okay? So if you're having swelling, you have to get to a lymphedema therapist to address it very early on, because just putting a sleeve on it will contain what you have, but it certainly won't reduce it. Exercises, things like golfing or tennis, very repetitive movements of your arm, tend to increase your risk a little bit more. However, if that's what you like to do for sport, I'm a golfer, I'm not gonna tell you to quit doing that. That's part of improving your quality of life. So yes, wearing a sleeve when you do those types of activities would be beneficial. If you're into CrossFit or something where you're lifting more heavier weights, also that would be beneficial. But if you just even have any questions about doing it, if you wear a sleeve, it's not going to harm you. So if you feel like, okay, I feel better, a peace of mind having this sleeve on, it won't cause you to have lymphedema. Does that answer the question?
Thank you.
We have another lymphedema question, something I think a lot of us really enjoy. Hot tubs, we've heard some myths and truths about that. Will it worsen lymphedema, cause lymphedema?
So my big thing about hot tubs is, I mean, from what I was taught as a young child and just going to the general doctor is, oh my gosh, hot tubs can be disgusting. There's like bacteria breeding grounds. We used to use whirlpools in PT. We don't use them anymore for the purpose that you can spread some bacteria. It's kind of dangerous. But yes, hot tubs, saunas, things like that. I mean, we've all been in them. If you have a high risk for lymphedema, having nodes removed, having radiation, if you're larger, obese, things that tend to up your risk factors for lymphedema, it's not the smartest idea to put yourself in that predicament. Now, we say avoid extreme heat climates, but we live in Florida, most of us, so how do you avoid that? So really, it is kind of your own personal choice. If you're going to get in a hot tub, I wouldn't say to stay longer. I always recommend patients, I tell them, don't be in heat or have heat on you for longer than 20 minutes. That's just a general accepted principle for thermotherapy in PT in general. But will it worsen your lymphedema? Not necessarily. Are you taking a gamble? Maybe. So it's still up in the air. It's not necessarily a true myth, but look at it as risk versus reward. If you have all those risk factors and you're getting in that hot tub thinking to yourself, maybe that's not such a good idea, then maybe you should stay away from it.
Sorry, so one of the questions that I found interesting that came up is about, it says nutritionist, dietitian, what's the difference? What credentials should we be looking for when choosing a practitioner? And I'm sure that crosses over even into the physical therapy and really someone that understands the side effects that young survivors go through.
Should we all go? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, nutritionist is sort of not a term that's regulated very well. So almost anyone could say, all of you, it's nice to meet all of you nutritionists out there. So when you're looking for an expert in nutrition, you want a registered dietitian. Now we have added sort of registered dietitian nutritionist onto it because of the confusion around that. So you for sure would want a registered dietitian. If you have sort of oncology specific questions, you can ask for the dietitian either at a cancer center or who is specialized in oncology. But they're not always available depending on where you live and where you're treated. But all dietitians have been trained very well to understand food, and we also have a good network so that if there's sort of an area that we're not comfortable with, we can reach out and ask somebody who is to help us. So definitely you want to look for a dietitian. If someone says they're a nutritionist, they could still be a dietitian. You would want to sort of dig down. But also you want to connect well with that person. kind of like I say, if you're finding a therapist, you want to interview them, and it might be a good fit and it might not. So, don't throw us all out just because you don't like me or something.
It's almost the same thing with physical therapists. So there are personal trainers and there are physical therapists. So I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I went to school to get a clinical doctorate in the study and practice that I do. So going to see somebody, if you guys want to write this down, on the APTA, which is the American Physical Therapy Association website, there's an oncology section where you can find your local oncology PTs. I also left my information on the handout, so if you really have an oncology-based question you'd like to ask, my email is on there, my Twitter handle is on there as well. Now, you'll see sometimes certified lymphedema therapists. Anyone with a professional license, nurse, massage therapist, can get certified in lymphedema. If you feel comfortable seeing a massage therapist, that's great for lymphedema, but if you have other sort of PT, actual like movement, functional mobility, limited range of motion, seeing a PT in the beginning would likely be better before you transition to maybe a personal trainer and then an MT.
And then finally, I wanted to add is that all dietitians are nutritionists, but not all nutritionists are dietitians. I had a girlfriend of mine, and she went online and she made her dog a nutritionist. You can just go online and pay money for a certification, and her dog is a nutritionist. So a registered dietitian nutritionist is the food and nutrition expert. I know that there's tons of shows on television, and I'm not gonna call any names, but Dr. So-and-so is not a dietitian, so ends with a Z. I'm glad you said that. But he's not a dietitian. A dietitian is the food and nutrition experts. We are the ones that have gone to school and that have went through the rigorous training to learn about food, and not just the culinary presentation of food, but how it impacts and affects the body. So we are the food and nutrition experts, just like Emilie is the doctor of physical therapy. She is not the health coach or the personal trainer.
So you can search for a dietitian in your area too. Eatright.org has a search, and you can choose specialties. And I know a lot of you probably, if you have a cancer diagnosis, you might also be dealing with, maybe you have osteoporosis, or maybe you have diabetes, or your lipid levels are off, your blood fats are needing addressing, and so it may be that you are better off seeing somebody who's not a cancer specialized dietitian, but somebody who can help, with the diabetes or whatever it is. So you can search on there to kind of pick and choose.
Or should I stick with fluid? Okay, I'm gonna stick with my original. Okay, no, it's okay, it's not bad. We all know the importance of drinking water and unsweetened drinks, but we do miss our sweetened, sometimes Cokes, Diet Cokes, all that good stuff. Any suggestions for something somewhat healthy on the sweetened side that we can still go to when drinking water and unsweetened drinks doesn't do it for us?
Well, sure. Like, what's moderation, right? So, of course, I told you a habit 3 times a week or more. If you want something that tastes sweet, which we all do, I call them special drinks, First off, make sure that you're not just drinking it out of some lame cup. If it's gonna be a special drink, you should put it in a fancy cup and have like an umbrella and a little wedge of lime on the side, right? You can use your wine glasses for more than just wine too. But you can do things like use seltzer water, or LaCroix is sort of the brand that I usually buy, and then mix it with juice. So instead of just having all out juice, you can do like a 2-to-1 juice with LaCroix, squeeze some lime into it. If you like things like cucumber water, lemon water, you can use even frozen fruits. You can put in water to give it flavor, but they don't have the same sweet taste. So I know clients who are trying to switch away from sweetened drinks. And then there's a lot of debate about diet sodas as well, because they don't have the sugar, but then they have the artificial sweeteners. So my feeling about diet drinks is actually pretty similar to my feeling about sodas and sweet tea. Is I would not want you to make a habit out of drinking diet drinks. It's not that I think artificial sweeteners are bad for you. I don't think that they're bad for you, but you are training your taste buds to like that really sweet taste, whether it's from an overly, sugary soda or the diet sodas. Your taste buds are gonna have a hard time really enjoying the flavor of fruit if it's looking for a really sweet drink. So I would rather you sort of wean back on how much. But again, if you are just doing it once a week, you know, if you have a diet soda once a week, it doesn't bother me. Honestly, if you have a glass, I tell my clients, if it's the family reunion and you have sweet tea at the family reunion, don't worry about it. Or like Sunday afternoon. It's the people who are having it with dinner every single night that it kind of becomes a problem.
I think you answered it. You nailed it.
You have a favorite drink?
You nailed it. Well,
special drink?
Something that my husband made for me a couple days ago. Live in Florida, and I live in the rural section, so there's orange and lemon trees everywhere. So I pick them and I use them. So he actually made fresh lemonade for me with cane sugar, and then we have some fresh peppermint that grows in the backyard. He just crushed it up, put it in there. We set it in the fridge for about 30 minutes, and it was divine. So you guys should try that. It gives the peppermint gives a nice kick to it.
Oh my gosh, okay. I feel like I have to share. 'Cause I made like a strawberry minty lemonade one time, and so it was lemon juice, which is of course very tart. And so to get the sweet, it was kind of a smoothie, because then I blended up the strawberries and added the lemon juice and then put mint in it. It was delicious.
I bet it.
2 recipes just like that. On a similar note, for someone that might have allergic reactions, while maybe not severe, still annoying when eating fruits and vegetables, what suggestions might you have to ensure that they can still consume enough plants?
I mean, so I don't have a lot of people who don't tolerate the fruits and vegetables outside of, you know, if their doctors told them stay away from the fresh ones while your counts are low. If, though, you have sort of that tingling in the mouth, I don't know if that's what this is in reference to, where sometimes fruits and vegetables, they are allergic to them. Finding sometimes cooked ones, or if you can remove the skin, that can help. Or finding different versions of them can be a strategy, or find the ones that don't bother you and eat more of those.
I know something that I do. I used to just get nauseous all the time when I ate fresh produce. So I started washing my produce with those lemons again that grow in the neighbor's backyard. So that's a tactic that I do as well. Additionally, eliminating the fruits and vegetables which may bother you. So if you find out, for instance, grapes, my husband is allergic to grapes and kiwi, so I can't bring those in the house because he's definitely allergic to them. So finding the ones that specifically bother you, it's okay to limit them and exclude them from your diet, but eat other ones. And also, I like to think of taste the rainbow. A lot of people know that as Skittles, but I think it's our fruits and vegetables. So try to get different produce that have different colors. If you can't do kiwi, then choose something else that is green, like a green apple. Or if you can't do grapes, do blueberries instead.
Can you talk a little bit about what is healthier, canned or frozen vegetables versus completely fresh?
Okay.
And is there a difference?
Say along. Any vegetable, better than no vegetable, okay? I think we both kind of talked about frozen vegetables probably would be our, if you can't do fresh, or sometimes, you know, the fresh vegetables are coming from a long ways away. I say frozen can be fresher than fresh because they pick them and freeze them right away, and then transporting them in the frozen state doesn't change their nutrition content. So I prefer frozen. But canned is very shelf stable, and so especially for people who are kind of living month to month, or you know, you've got medicine that is extremely expensive. If things are on sale, you want to stock up. So if you can stock up your freezer. But I use some canned vegetables, like black beans are really hard. I cannot get them right from dried, and they take forever anyway. So I think it's a combination. As long as all of your vegetables aren't canned, I wouldn't worry about it.
Right, I agree. Something that I do practice in my home, because my family does have a history of high blood pressure, and you know that the salt can probably contribute to the lymphedema as well. When you open that can, just put it in a colander and rinse it. Rinse off the excess sodium. So if in ideal world, which we do not live in a utopia, fresh, then frozen, then canned. And again, the budget, I'm on a budget, so I do have canned in my cupboard.
So changing subjects just a bit, losing weight while metastatic and menopausal can be extremely difficult. And one of our attendees is saying, I know myself, I'm dealing with bone degeneration and tons of pain. Where do you recommend starting some level of exercise?
So that's also a really great question. I see people from, across the span of where they are in their cancer journey. And when you have metastatic cancer, you still can exercise. Engaging in some more like aquatic or like yoga, some more gentle exercises that aren't going to be very hard on your bone structure is very helpful. And again, it's really important that if you're dealing with metastatic breast cancer, you have a good team, a close team of people. The patients I do have that have metastatic breast cancer that I work with, I keep a very close communication with the doctor on, okay, this is how this person is progressing and how they're doing. And as far as pain levels go, it can be really, really debilitating to exercise when you're having pain. So even engaging in like meditation and things like that, deep breathing will also help as well. So yes, looking for lower impact exercises and starting a program like that. And especially if you do have metastatic breast cancer, it's so much more important for you to get in with a licensed physical therapist to really come up with a specialized program tailored for you.
Thank you. Along those lines, someone posed a question about rebounding to keep a healthy lymph system. And the two of us are saying, do you know what that is? No, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is? So clearly you know what that is. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I think this question, if I remember correctly, and I know what it is from patients who've told me, more like a trampoline type rebounding, like a little bit of like jumping. That's what I know it to be. And I mean, I have a rebounder for the arm. So it's basically you're throwing a ball and it's coming off of. Any sort of those types of exercises, those are safe to do. And we teach decongestive exercises. And that's one of the things that we'll teach is like some light trampoline exercises encompassed with breathing exercises and, some different other techniques, low level aerobic, but resistant strengthening. So yes, it's okay to engage in that. I wouldn't say doing high level plyometrics, it's just gonna be really tough on your joints anyway, but rebounding is fine.
This is for Kim and Julie. What are the thoughts on the brands that offer meats grown in a lab?
Meats grown in a lab. I'm not sure what meats are grown in a lab, but I'm thinking that maybe the farmed kind of, or the farmed salmon maybe is sort of the question as opposed to fish in the stream. It's like a fake stream, pretend stream. I don't know if that. Okay. So again, I am not that concerned about. I think we want to know where our food comes from. It's important that we understand the farming process. Meat grown in a lab doesn't concern me from a nutrition standpoint. I think that we would know that the quality, what you're going for, if you're consuming meat, if you are a meat eater, is it's your protein source. And you, on the plate, like the circle, we all have the circle and proteins in the corner, that would be anywhere from 15 to 25 grams of protein. So if you're eating meat, that's the size of the palm of your hand, no fingers, same thickness, deck of cards, that is 21 grams of protein. And so the other piece is like, if you do eat meat, you do not need to eat that much. And so if you put that in context of, are you concerned about the quality of the meat that you're eating? Yes, you should be. I don't know of any evidence-based guidelines that suggest you shouldn't eat like farmed, salmon or other types of meat. I think it's still emerging information, and so we of course just kind of watch and see, but I wouldn't be concerned about it that much. What I'm more concerned about if you are a meat eater is how much are you actually having? And then of course, you should eat a variety. So it's not like you should only be eating that one type of meat all the time anyway. So to me, if it's in moderation and you eat lots of different things, that would not be my biggest concern. If you eat that same kind of meat all the time, yeah, you'd want to maybe think about a good quality source, but then I'd also want you to switch it up sometimes.
With that being said, I think it's also a matter of taste preference. Like, for instance, my grandmother, she lives not too far from here in a rural area near Gainesville, and she has her own chickens, which she kills and eats because it's a matter of taste for her. So I think that is the main concern. If you find that the meat tastes different, if you grow it yourself or if you buy organic or meat raised in a lab, it's just a matter of personal taste preference. And the food that we do consume, the food that is on the market, it goes through a lot of bells and whistles before it gets to us. So that would, meat grown in a lab, yeah.
So thank you. As Jen comes on up, we're going to take our last similar question. What about pickled food? Should we avoid sauerkraut, things of that nature? All good? Thoughts?
I think that it can be very confusing, all these little individual questions. And it's true, we say avoid processed meat. And then it's like, well, what exactly is processed meat? And I wrote on it, and I've looked into it, and I'm like, well, okay, does canned, tuna count as processed meat? Because it's, there's sodium in it. And sometimes I'm just like, you know what? We gotta take it down a notch. But it's a fair question. Do pickled foods count as processed? And so I would tell you it depends how it's done. There's lots of different ways that you pickle. So some people pickle at home, and fridge pickling or something where you just use vinegar basically. You put vinegar in a jar with your cucumbers and you leave it in the fridge for a certain number of days and it turns into pickles. Whereas when you buy them at the store, on the shelf, to be shelf stable, they are using sodium, not because they're evil. They're just using sodium because it is a way to preserve food. And so it will depend on the product is kind of my bottom line, is what's actually in it. When you buy food at the grocery store, you should read the ingredient list. And you should understand, oh, okay, yeah, that's what's in it, okay, fine. So the sodium to me is the biggest issue with pickled foods. But again, how often are you having it? Are you having it every day? Then we might be concerned. If you're only having it like the pickle that comes with your sandwich and you don't eat it anyway, it doesn't matter, right? So somewhere in there.
And in closing, before Jennifer comes up, I wanted to add, don't be the food police. All foods fit into a healthy diet. The issue becomes when you have 60% of your diet be these processed and ultra-processed food. The take-home point is to increase your intake of fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, legumes, while you can still enjoy the animal products that you do like. So don't be the food police. Don't beat up yourself. Don't develop an eating disorder. But just realize, adhere to a predominantly plant-based diet.
Let's give them a round of applause.